And now for the interesting part, Sriram, come over here. So basically, some people may or may not be aware that Splash exists as a combination of events, of which OOPSLA is obviously one. Some people may be wondering how it works. For example, a question I sometimes get asked is, how do I get on an OOPSLA committee? We can answer that if you are interested, or any other questions you may have. Or maybe you have questions about rounds, and whether we should have 1 or 5, or however many rounds. We are here. Sriram and Sukyun are the 2PC chairs. They'll be with us. If you have any questions about other events, we have Stephen, who is the Onward Steering Committee Chair, who is also here, or any other sub-events. The organizers, Charles and Ilya, are here, and I have to manage the communication with them at all times. So, you know, now and again I get messages and things like that. So, anyone, if you have any questions, just come up to the mics and ask us.
Okay, so here's what's going on. Normally the way these things go, there's a business meeting, and at the business meeting the chairs will put up a bunch of slides, and in the slides we will tell you we got this many papers, this many were accepted, this many were rejected, this many went round 1, this many went round 2, and nobody cares. And then somebody will say, oh, and then what about the different categories of topics? We got this many static analysis papers, this many testing papers, and then you say this many static analysis papers got accepted, this many testing papers got rejected. Okay, and then people are like, okay, this many people are from India, this many people are from USA, this many people are from China, and everyone's like, okay. And then are there any questions? And of course there are questions, right? Because there's, like, people will respond to whatever you show them. So if you say, well, they're like, well, you know, how did you count the people who are both in industry and in academia? And then there'll be like a 7-minute debate about this, and none of this means anything. It's a complete waste of time. Okay? So what we thought would be much more interesting is to actually have a conversation with the community. Now, at the end of the conference, there's going to be a survey, and we ask you to please fill out the survey. We learn a lot from the survey, right? And if you have criticisms of us, you can criticize us too at the survey. But there's not an opportunity for a back and forth. Like, you submit a survey, it goes into a black hole, and who knows what happens. Right? So we're trying something completely new. There are no slides from the chairs. There's no presentation. We're just here to answer questions, and you can ask us all the questions that you have about the conference. In particular, there's a lot of students in the room, and you might be curious, how does any of this shit work? Okay? And we are happy to answer to the extent we possibly can. Okay? And I know at least, where's Max, by the way? Max New. Okay, at least Max New has a question to get us started off, so he can come and yell at us about something. And while Max is walking up, we want the rest of you to have some questions as well. Steve, I'm looking at you next. Yeah.
We do have some plants, and if necessary, we'll get like Jonathan.
Actually, he's not a plant, just so you know. He's oh, Catherine has a question. Okay. Yeah, Max, go ahead.
Okay, Max New. Hello. Max New, University of Michigan. I have 2 questions. First of all, what was the breakdown of the papers by continent?
And secondly, how did you count the papers over 2 categories? Yeah.
Okay, but seriously, so I had a paper here, and the lead author on the paper is my student, and he was not able to leave for fear of not being able to get back into the country for visa issues. And well, okay, we didn't really want to do a virtual presentation or anything, so it's not about that, but just there was no official option to say that we could present at a different SIGPlan conference or the next year's conference or anything like that. And
if I didn't know better, I bet Alex wants to say something about this.
So my question is, could we improve this process and have some kind of official SIGPlan policies, either at Splash or entirety of SIGPlan, to address these kind of situations?
Great question. Go.
Can I answer? So, yes, I am also happy to be on SIGPlan executive, and we have a concept that we didn't exercise at this conference because of the numerous logistical problems and a lot of papers, but that will be done in 2026, because Frank has already confirmed that we are doing it, which is called SIGPlan track. We have tried this before, and at the next SC chairs meeting for the 4 main conferences, the POPL, PLDI, ICFP and Splash. It will be officially discussed to confirm. The idea being is very straightforward. If you haven't physically presented your paper in the last, let's say, year or so of the SIGPlan events, you obviously got it published. It goes into proceedings of the ACM. And you will be able to come to any of the other 4 and submit proposal for your talk, and subject to logistical issues, not the actual research issues, we will try to accommodate it, because as a general chair, why would you say no to somebody coming in, paying a registration and attending your conference, to be honest, as long as you can accommodate the actual presentation. It is actually separate conversation we can have about runs and other things, but SIGPlan track is coming, and we will try to do it across conferences. Next year, there are general chairs here, actually, except for ICFP for PLZI, Evan, and Sandrine, you're here maybe for Popol, and so you can ask them in person as well.
Okay. Happening across SIGPlan?
Which Andrew needs to organize, where all of the 4 SC chairs need to actually officially agree on it. We've been pushing for it actually for a little while, because I've been pushing it ever since we sort of started moving to like New Zealand and other places. Okay. And we haven't got the agreement confirmed by all SCs, but Splash SC was always one of the more friendly to that one, if that makes sense. Yep.
So for context, for people who don't know about this, for context, there was a SIGPlan track added after COVID. So all the conferences are very friendly about travel difficulties after COVID, and it sort of disappeared because it was sort of, I guess, deemed not as important anymore. One could argue about that, it doesn't matter. What I would say is people who think this is a valuable thing should take it up actually with the SIGPlan leadership. As Alex said, I think Splash has always been more open to this than maybe some of the other venues. And so I think people who think this is important write to SIGPlan leadership and say this is a thing that's important to us as SIGPlan members, because the more community pressure there is, the less choice they'll have about it. Right now what Alex is saying is, well, you know, the next year's Popol chair is here, next year's so-and-so's chair, but that's not an institute, as you have correctly identified, that is not an institutional statement. And I think SIGPlan should think about making it an institutional one.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to make a few comments about the review process, and then I will get to a question. So I'm Catherine McKinley from Google. So previously, Sriram, you can't run away. This is for you and Suk Young. So in the very, very long ago, when we used to have in-person program committees, one of the purposes of those committee meetings was to vet the papers more broadly. So it wasn't just about the 3 people who read the paper making the decision. And so then things like missing related work, or I read a very similar paper, maybe by the same authors, maybe by different authors, and in our quest to be more efficient and make the process better, we've decided to have fewer in-person meetings. We don't have those anymore. And so the community aspect of looking at papers has declined a lot in the current structure. So how can we get some of that back? Because I think science is a community process, and if you don't get the perfect expert and you're not getting those extra eyes on the paper that we have, hurt the process. And could we do something like use LLMs to say, if you were writing this paper, what related work would you cite, and make sure that that some of the previous work is cited correctly for the people who aren't experts. So the seriousest topic is we can't have an expert on every paper. We have a new process where we don't get a bunch of eyes on every paper. What can we do to improve the science and the quality of reviews with the tools that we have now?
I guess anyone can start. So we have this proposal. Is it either OOPSLA or PLDI? I'm confused. I'm in both of them. So someone proposed to use LLM to have some first filtering. But most of the SC members did not like that idea. And about this in-person PC meeting, thank you.
I didn't suggest they do the first filtering. I suggest that they create a related work section, which is a little different.
Because
right?
they've never been known to hallucinate a paper, so at least that won't be a problem. Yeah.
So we cannot say the details, but we had many instances with both with authors and reviewers related to LLMs.
Right.
Right. So I think it's a really serious problem.
So I think, Catherine, your question is an excellent one, right? You're basically, people like us grew up in a generation where there was a PC of 12 people, and we all flew to some place and we spent 2 days arguing about every one of the 83 papers, and it was awesome, right? It was an amazing educational experience for us and everything else. And we're now dealing with about 600 papers, and just the math of it suggests we have to have about 100 reviewers just because there's only so many reviewing units. And I don't think it is, I think we have to just assume that that is not the thing that is going to happen anymore. And other events like Onward didn't have a live PC, but an event like Onward that has 52 papers can have a completely different process, just as we do not have the same process as NeurEPS does with 17,000 papers, right? And each level of scale is going to have a completely different process. So I think we tried as much as one could to try to get experts and non-experts. In fact, like I believe very strongly that people get really worked up about non-expert reviewers for a paper. I think it is super healthy to have non-expert, like not all three, that would be pretty bad, but it's great to have one non-expert reviewer on a paper, because for two things. One, it's going to make the paper more accessible. It's going to force it into at least like 2 readable pages before it dives into the depths. And the other thing it's going to do is it's going to spot like bullshit, right? Like somebody's going to be like, I don't understand this, none of this makes any sense. And it's also going to spot scientific fraud if that happens. If you have like a reviewer click, somebody's going to be like, I'm not part of this click, something shady is going on here, right? So we did not actually work that hard to have only expert reviewers, right? We didn't tip the scale too much. We tried to make sure there was some expertise, but not full expertise. The business about community communication is, I think it's unfortunate, and I have to say this, is like when you have 100+ reviewers, you do not know them personally and you can't hold them accountable, right? So like the chair's job is a very different one in this era, where it's like try to do the best you can. Now we had some astoundingly great reviewers, and we had like many, 7 of whom happened to be called out, but we had many more than that. There were lots of astoundingly great reviewers, but not all of them, and there was no accountability. Like, I think there are reviewers, we didn't know who some of them were. I mean, like, you know, we have a process by which we put people on a RC, but we don't know 120 people really well. So I think this is a great question. I'm just not going to come up with a great answer, because I think we are just dealing with a different kind of thing than the thing you and I are thinking about and that we grew up with.
Well, you can't do that because of scale.
Yeah.
So how do you create a process that protects against some of the abuses of scale and the problems with scale, so that we as a community have high quality work and we publish high quality?
So one thing we can do is monitor reviews intently, and we did that. Okay, I think like just about every review got read by us, and that's like, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of reviews, right?
So
and
thank you, but that's
well,
not
no, I mean that's our
either.
job. That's our job. And
right?
I think the greatest thing about SIGPlan is the quality of reviewing. It is the single greatest thing about this community, that this many people are willing to do this much work trying to do the best possible job they can. When we sent out review invitations, okay, Alex wants me to shut up, so okay.
I just want to point out that we have used area or now associate chairs for a while. It's almost a requirement to have a person dedicated to 50-to-1 paper ratio to help the RC chairs to monitor both the quality of the reviews and the chasing of timeliness. It's still in place. Plus, we currently have the OOPSLA steering committee, which is us who were the previous recent RC chairs, working through some of the quirks, improving the process. We do it every time, addressing the scalability issues. We are We are hitting high numbers, not 1,000 yet, but almost.
The AE does, but part of our invite, for those of you who are on the RC, the opening thing in the invitation was SIGPLAN has an amazing review culture and we're inviting you to be a part of it and to help us sustain it. And we kept coming back to the culture point, right? So I think there are things like that, reminding people of culture, bringing them into the culture, and then monitoring, and of course the AEs are a significant part of it as well. Some of us have been AEs for other people in this room, and other people have been AEs for us. So I think like that is a means of trying to address scale that's not the same as what you're asking for, but I think it's a great conversation. We should continue the conversation offline.
We should, as a community, continue thinking
Yeah.
about how we scale.
Completely agreed.
And with high quality.
Completely agreed.
Could I just say something because it's relevant to this? So Catherine, I agree with your comments completely, and I really miss the in-person PC meetings. What I did, when I chaired POPL, is I tried to run a Zoom meeting. It ran across 3 different time zones, so that worked for Europe, US, and Asia. And basically either US, Europe were there, or US, Asia were there, or the other. So we did it that way. It really does help. When Jan and I ran OOPSLA'25, we did it a little bit differently. We just took the papers that were more in contention and discussed those. But nonetheless, I think that we as a community for SIGPLAN, we need to see if we can make some version of that work. Because it's not just that it leads to better outcomes for the papers, there's also this matter of training junior people. Right? When we were junior, we learned from the people in the room, the senior people in the room. First of all, we got to go there and perhaps impress them, but we also learned from them what the standards of the community were, and that's how they got passed down to us. And I don't know how we are passing them down exactly right now when it's only 3 people discussing each paper. So I would really love to see some version of Zoom PC meetings made to work. I think it can be made to work. It's just, it is a lot of work for the chair.
I
But
will
with associate chairs, maybe it could scale.
I will just say I don't think it's only 3 people and 3 people.
Yeah.
No, but I think this is an important clarification,
It's
right?
less.
It's not it's not just like 3 reviewers just talking amongst themselves. There's 3 reviewers, there's an associate editor who's keeping track of things, and there are 2 chairs who are reading and actively participating. We've between us posted hundreds of messages, getting involved in lots of conversations. Perhaps the chagrin of some of the reviewers are like, could you people please shut up? But we did post a lot of messages and get interact, and part of that was exactly the cultural stuff, right? The cultural transmission. This is how we're going to do things, this is how we do things, etc. So there is some of that education happening. I think your work with the Zoom meetings was amazing. Everyone has raved about what a great job you did on chairing multiple things, and I think there's some learning there. Part of it is, I think SIGPLAN doesn't have very good like repositories of knowledge.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's no place as a chair. I mean, like Alex wrote some notes, and there's something's in Dropbox, something's in Google Drive. ACM, the First Society of Information, doesn't know how to maintain a file. So, like it's amazing. Yeah. So we have some technological problems as well that get in the way.
Yeah, we
but what
need
was
to
your
pass-
question and comment? Well, Amal, did you have something you want to say?
It
or-
wasn't a question. I just
That
wanted
was
to
just a
respond to
response.
that 'cause it
Thank
was-
you.
Sofia Drosopoulou from Imperial College. It's related to the question of the papers that are in contention. And a proposal that I had many years ago, I must say I didn't have the guts to put it through myself, but still I thought that it was a good proposal at the time, is that the papers that are in contention should not be judged in isolation, but with respect to the subject matter and the provenance. So I think that at the start of the deliberations, there is a set of papers that are definitely going through and a set of papers that are definitely not going through. But for the others, perhaps rather than try to decide for each of them, the 3 reviewers and perhaps the area chairs and so on, whether they are good in absolute, what they should decide is, from the pool of all these papers in contention, let's choose with the aim to have diversity in subject and diversity in authors. Kill me.
I think you should pass your comments along to next year's chairs and see what they think about it. This is luckily not our problem anymore.
But thanks for the suggestion, Sophia.
I mean, look, the area diversity is actually an interesting one. The author diversity runs into some very obvious problems, and I think you know exactly what they are. So. I think you should send this conversation over to the steering committee, and I think we should have that discussion in a broader context than right.
By the way, to clarify, yes, if you go to sicplan.org, you can navigate to Splash and figure out who is the chair of the appropriate steering committee, say Popol or OOPSLA or whatever, and do email them. Like, these emails are not ignored. So in Splash or in OOPSLA case, you can email me.
Steve Blackburn, Google DeepMind. Very quick comment on that last conversation. I think that maintaining and establishing cultural norms is incredibly important, and that's what worries me most about the scale. End of comment. To the question that Sriram asked me to ask. Yeah, look, unfortunately I only got to arrive here on Wednesday night, but I have so much enjoyed the fact that we're co-located with ICFP. There's so many conversations I've had. Yeah, there are.
Thanks, Ilya.
There are so many conversations I've had that I would not have had we had not had that co-location. So my question is this: what's your perspective as the organisers between the three of you, and is this something that's going to happen again?
So Splash is open to help this happen. In fact, what happened in the past is just the right people in the right room happened to talk to each other to make this happen. But ICFP steering committee, some of whom are still around, but some have left, is interested to explore this further. It's not going to happen next year, obviously, because these things take at least two years to plan. There is a serious consideration, but probably not 27, but they're really keen to look at coming back as long as people communicate clearly to the ICFP steering committee that they liked that, as well as our Splash attendees communicate to us to pass on to ICFP steering committee that they also enjoyed that. So that feedback is important, because otherwise people are just guessing what may happen. And I'm glad that people sort of enjoyed the collocation and have seen people from both areas.
It really strengthens our community.
That's right.
I think we should consider putting it on our final survey.
We will. Yeah, this is for, I guess, Charles and Ilya, technically, yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Harry Goldstein, University at Buffalo. So the cost and location of conferences like Splash and other SIGPlan conferences varies tremendously from year to year. And I'm just wondering how possible would it be to know a little further than 1 year in advance for the purpose of long-term planning, you know, orders of magnitude of cost and things like that?
Yes, I actually know exact answers to those questions. Now, first thing about locations, the simple thing. We have realized our mistake, and there is now a coordinated spreadsheet to make sure that we are not 3 conferences in Europe, 3 conferences in Asia, 3 conferences in US.
Great.
So that is now being looked at by all of the steering committees. Regarding the cost, here is the thing. We were hit by COVID. Up until COVID, things were basically going great. We could model the conferences in hotels. The registration stayed $200 per day US for a full attendee for about 20 years without change. We didn't care about inflation. The interest rates were 0. Everyone was happy. Then COVID happened. There was a hiatus. Prices gone up a little bit in the last 25 years. So we kind of couldn't do 200 a day as we did in 2000, forget 2020, right? So we had to sort of scramble to fix things. The campus locations is something that sometimes saves money. So when I was a general chair for Splash'22, it was in New Zealand, it was on campus, in case anyone was there. ICFP next year, Sam is holding it on campus in Indiana University. These things are a little tricky because you need to fit it in either a break or the teaching sort of availability and things like that, which means the dates are affected. When it goes to a hotel, well, at that point, you pay the room rates that are high, you pay the AV and other ridiculous things, which sometimes burn us badly, and like unexpected things happen. And these things are designed for professional sort of large-scale events. A typical budget of a conference in a hotel for sick plan is on the order of $500,000. Sometimes these things are a lot more, sometimes they're a lot less, but this is a current typical budget. Now, sick plan is different from many other SIGs. We actually do a lot of things others don't do. We have PLMW, which is fully funded trip plus free registration that sick plan funds. We have PAC for professional activities that sick plan funds. We have covered article processing fees for those who couldn't pay it for a while. It's now changing, of course, but sick plan was funding up to now. We have quite a large, more than necessary amount of student volunteers in general so that we can actually support students coming. We require the authors of the paper to register as a student, if you like, not require a full registration to present a paper. In fact, you can pay no money, not come to conference, and still have it in PAC and PL that we will cover. The conference publishing and others have to be paid fees and all of that. We don't have the level of sponsorship that, say, my friends in robotics have, who said, well, yeah, our fees are low, but we get 40 or 50% of our budget from sponsors. What's your percentage? It is not a 40 or 50% percentage. In fact, a lot of large companies have kind of pulled out from PL, and for example, our student research competition for 20 years was supported by some company, and after 20 years they said, nah, we can't afford it. So who picks up the tab? Sick plan. How does sick plan make money? There are two ways to make money. One is sick plan membership fee. We have 1,000 members for the last 20 years. It hasn't changed despite the number of submissions going up. It's $25. So we get $25,000 from sick plan membership fees every year. Everything else is whatever we make or loss on a conference. All of these things I've mentioned are covered by whether we make or loss on a conference. For a while, we were okay in 2010s. It is not a good picture ever since 2020. And doesn't matter what the numbers are, trust me, it's really bad. We're trying to get out from it, figuring out how to do it. It's a tough time right now. So any suggestions, please email the steering committees.
Yeah, Adam Chapala, MIT. I wanted to ask about your impressions watching the whole reviewing process, and in particular, multiple rounds of revision and reviewing, and just how all of this is getting calibrated across the reviewers and the authors. One caricatured impression I've gotten of a potential outcome at the moment is because the reviewers have some strongly held suggestions for presentation improvements. The paper should be presented 1 year later than otherwise. And it's just not obvious to me that that's the right equilibrium. And curious, what do you think about it?
I think that is an unfair caricature. Not only is it a caricature, it's an unfair and incorrect caricature. Okay. We did our very best to get papers not going over 1 year. In fact, we sort of actually, we did something to help authors even after the official second round deadline. We added an extra 1 week deadline just to get the papers that were close enough to the line over the wire. Okay, and we added another about 20 papers. There's at least about 20 papers here that got added that we just like burned the midnight oil to get those papers out of the queue. Okay, so I think that's not an accurate representation. In general, we monitored what was happening, and I think papers that were held over were generally for pretty reasonable reasons. But I don't think there's certainly neither a conscious effort to keep papers longer than necessary, like, oh, let's make sure every paper goes for a year. You notice there's no statistics here. There's no slide telling you how wonderfully competitive we were. We got yelled at for accepting too many papers, which we would not have gotten yelled at if we hadn't done things to get more papers over the line. So I don't think that's really what happened. I can understand that in individual cases, A, it may feel that way, B, it may even have happened in an individual case, but it did not happen collectively. Does that answer the question? Or I mean, there wasn't a question, so I don't have to answer it.
Wait. The question is, what do you think about this second 2 rounds thingy? And I don't like it. Personally, I don't like it. There's so many rounds and it's so complex, too much work for the chairs and the reviewers. Reviewers are so overloaded. Yeah.
So one thing that is likely to happen from next year is we are likely to go back to a single round.
Actually, I'm going to dare do this. Can you raise your hand if you think we should have one round? And the second question will be if you want to have two rounds. So two questions. First, if you want to have one round, raise your hand.
I feel like the terminology gets overloaded. Are you talking about number of deadlines or number of reviews of a paper?
Okay, fine.
Sorry, it's an ill-defined question because we're talking about like, is there a revision process, et cetera, et cetera. I think, okay, Alex wants a vote, we'll do a vote. Okay, so when we say one round, we mean the thing that happened, for example, between October and December, where you get a chance to resubmit the paper, but you don't get like a second new submission deadline, right? So there's only one time in the year when we do an intake of papers. One submission deadline in the year. Now those papers, there might be enough time to let the papers get revised and resubmitted and that sort of stuff. That all counts within one round. Okay, yeah. Won't you vote? Okay, I guess
the problem is everyone uses round terminology to mean.
Well, we've just pinned it down.
This one.
So, okay. How many people want one round?
One round with all of the revisions, of course, as part of that.
Oh, more people than I thought. Okay.
Okay. And no, the second question. It's impossible. Yeah, that's right.
Also just move on to the next question. Let's move on to the next question.
Email the steering committee chair with your thought, because we are currently having
Email the chair with your thoughts, thank you.
Because we actually have a working group right now, which is previous RC chairs for OOPSLA, working through exactly that problems and trying to figure out how we can improve our process. We have currently 2 rounds, in case you wondered, the one before now, we had the round 1 submission, that's what we call rounds. And then we'll have a round 2 submission in April. Right? That's what we meant by the 2 rounds. That's not the same as also figuring out how to do major revision and the conditional accept and going through many, many rounds of revision. Unfortunately, the same word, that's all. But yeah, we're working on it. Moving on. Yep.
Hello, Yanis Maragdakis, University of Athens and DDOB. So.
Whoa. Sorry? Yeah, 2 rounds. Oh, you want to vote? Okay, who wants to have 2 rounds as we have now, exactly as we have now? Oh, okay. Oh. Ooh.
How many of the people who vote for 2 rounds were on the review committee?
Oh, interesting.
Okay. Good.
Interesting.
Okay.
So actually, that is an interesting piece of data. We will include it in the survey. That's right. We will do it in the survey to get this. Yes.
Okay. First, I'll start with a comment that just arose while I was waiting in line. The ICFP and OOPSLA synergy. I also enjoyed having ICFP here the days before. 6 years ago, SIGPlan did run a questionnaire on whether some conferences could perhaps be co-located. ICFP and OOPSLA, if I remember correctly, had 5 people who actually said they would register for both. It was like an order of magnitude lower than the overlap between any other 2 SIGPlan conferences. So ICFP and OOPSLA are pretty disjoint sets, although when we meet, we enjoy each other. So let's keep that in mind. Let's not be so positive. When it works, it's fantastic. For people like me, it's fantastic. I met lots of people I know. So let's keep that in mind. Like the numbers do not favor a co-location of ICFP.
I'll just say were as opposed to are.
Sure. In 6 years, we all changed. Right. Yeah. So my main point, though, so clearly, I'm a very cynical person, as you all know, so I come here and I attend all the OOPSLA sessions and I see paper after paper where I'm like, how did this get accepted? Of course, I don't see the stuff that got rejected. And
I've got my laptop. If you got some paper numbers, I can tell you.
Yeah, okay. That's not my point. In the time of overloaded review committees with multiple rounds, and many hundreds of submissions, and double-blind reviewing, where we have no idea who the authors are, what mostly, I know that there's a lot of arbitrariness and any two committees will come up with entirely different decisions. I'm perfectly fine with arbitrariness, but what I'd like to weed out is fraud, outright fraud, collusion. And I'd like to know what program chairs have done or will, or to encourage to do more in the future about policing outright fraud. Like someone gets a paper, they're reviewing it, they know who the authors are, and they have agreed to give them a good score, or any other kind of collusion. You know, is there a channel where someone can raise objections to such cases?
The good news is I'm just as cynical as you are. This will be a shock to you. So the point, no, but I bring this up because there are people I've known in the community who are appalled at even the suggestion that fraud could happen, who clearly don't know about, say, SIGACT and the, various other communities where things have happened. I think this is where things like the associate editors help, where having non-expert reviewers actually really helps, because those people are more likely to spot things that are going on. Right? Now, outright, like if somebody hides collusion well enough, like by definition, it's undetectable, right? I was actually expecting a slight variant of your question, so I'm going to answer the question I want to answer instead, which is basically a different problem, which is like LLM generated stuff, okay? And we've had surprisingly little of it so far, which don't get ideas, people, just because you're hearing about this. We had relatively little of it on the paper side, and we had even less of it from what we could tell on the review side. There was one case where somebody thought their review was LLM written, and I reached out and it turned out like the author was just amazed to hear that that was the way their review was characterized. And I even made, I'm not going to get into details here, but I made it very easy for them to say, oh, I see what happened. And I gave them a really easy out, and they didn't take the out. They're like, no, I really did write it. So I don't know. So we've seen relatively little of the LLM problem. I think we're aware of all the issues that happen, all of the frauds that happen. We're very deeply aware of the SIG-ARCH problem, for example. I think we've done the best we can to detect, but it's not certainly out of like naivete or like some amazing belief in humans. But we don't have great systematic ways.
I would mostly like to encourage a more systematic lifting of the double blind among the chairs. If there is a certain suspicion of a certain kind where someone says, hey, look, this is not making sense, check more. That's my point.
So just so I understand, can you just, for a simple brain like mine, can you just explain very concretely, the chairs do have access to the author's names anytime they want it? Yeah.
And they investigate, like, if someone raises a flag, is there an official channel for someone to raise a flag?
There's not an official channel that I'm aware of.
I mean, I'm not saying that I have a solution. I'm just saying if we can come up with some process for that, it might be good, because at least it's probably not happening at all, but at least it will put the mind at ease.
There were other forms of bad behavior on the part of authors that the chairs did get actively involved in and like worked on correcting. And I will not say more about what those were.
But I'm just saying every year there is instances that happen.
As a clarification, I'm puzzled. Yanni, what you're proposing is that authors should have a way of complaining directly to the chairs, or that after a paper has been presented and you wonder how come it was
both, everything. Other reviewers...
Anybody should raise a concern about the paper, or what?
Other reviewers can raise concerns, authors can raise concerns, anything.
I mean, Yannis, those
Hot CRP gives us a way to say good review, and both to the author and bad review, and needs work, and we can say that both as authors to the reviewers and as reviewers to other reviewers, and I suppose that the chairs do that unofficially through reading the reviews.
Come on. The good review is based on length of review.
Can we okay,
we can take it offline, Yannis.
Okay. I think we've hit the point where this conversation is not being useful anymore. Let's move on to a new person, please. Yeah.
Jean Pichon, Aarhus University. So there's a phenomenon that I've observed and that other colleagues have pointed out to me, that in this venue and other venues, be they online forums or other things, that when you raise a question or a query or you ask something, then you get referred to, oh, you should go to this other thing. So, maybe go to the the in-person meeting, maybe ask the steering committee. And I mean, to put it in unkind terms, I think some people get the impression that it's a bit of a pass the parcel game. I think to put it in fairer terms, I think people see it as disempowering, that they feel that the thing is sort of moving without progress. So is there a sort of a guideline, an official characterization of like, if you have query or complaint of type X, you should raise it to person Y or Z or venue Y or Z?
So it looks like we are not yet sure what kind of problems that would be, but usually it could be sick plan EC, I guess.
No, ACM has clear publication policies. They have also people that we can raise the issues, which we do with. They have processes that they follow and investigate incidents.
I think maybe there was a bit of a miscommunication. So things about, I think Gabriel Scherer wrote to the Types mailing list about holding conferences in the US or not in the US. And I think the answer was, oh, you should raise it as an in-person meeting. And then today, as people were raising questions at an in-person meeting, the answer that you were providing was, oh, you should ask the steering committee. And so there's a bit of a question like, well, what is like the limit of the sequence?
This is not a limited, there is a fixed point. My name is Alex.
So what is the fixed point? Tell me what the fixed point is.
The SIG plan, where Ilya, myself, and a few people here are members of executive committee, we raise it in our meetings. The official communication by SIG plan is at 2 meetings in Popl and PLDI in person, but they also discuss things offline. And these things include whether to locate conferences, I don't know, in New Zealand, not in New Zealand, and things like that come up as part of that. And then there is every, I think, 4 months or whatever, the meeting of the steering committee chairs that SIG plan runs to pass that information down to the 4 main conferences, and that's how it propagates. So for example, the rotation of locations is just, it doesn't happen instantly, right? Because it's 2 years out. That is now coordinated, and it was an issue raised by people who said, why are you all in, Asia in 1 year and things like that. So it's the same thing with this, US versus non-US. Well, maybe SIG plan trackers an answer. It will be discussed at the next steering committee. It happens. That's how the process works. And if you want to communicate with SIG plan, on sigplan.org it actually has the people, and we elect them, the 1,000 people who pay $25.
I'm one of them.
Get to vote who is going to do it for 3 years. I'm not sure how to answer it other than that's the process.
I would like to think we didn't refuse to answer a question this evening. What we said is if a lot of people feel this way, it helps to send mail to the steering committee to understand the strength of sentiment. And there's some it's like if you want further details, you can reach out. But okay, let me be really clear. If there's a question this evening we haven't answered, please ask it again, and I promise I will answer it. Go for it.
I think it was more a query about the process, because it feels kind of weird that it's like you have to take the next hop. So I think you've answered it in a satisfactory fashion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. Hila Peleg, Technion. I think it's maybe a little too early to try to extrapolate from the number of submissions each one of the conferences gets as to whether our growth is linear or exponential or doubly so or whatnot. But I think it's been probably several conferences in a row where we get the email from the chair saying, oh, we've had way more submissions than we've been expecting. And each conference tends to handle it kind of in its own way, whether it's dumping more load on the review committee and whether it's threatening authors that they're going to have to review and then acting on it. Are there any plans to have a more structural thing, maybe in how the review committee is structured or something like that? Maybe get some ideas from other communities who've been dealing with scale longer, and maybe some of the communities that are dealing with it better rather than the ones that are dealing with it worse.
So it's related to the previous question. So we do have 4 conferences, right? And as Alex said before, to me, those 4 conferences were not talking to each other. until now. And we do have the SIG Plan EC, and we are trying to answer those questions, but not well. So sorry that I was the SIG Plan EC member before. We didn't do the good job. But now that, as Alex said, we are collecting the data and we are going to share the list. We didn't even have a common list of keynote speakers over those 4 conferences. So there are many data that we are not using each other. So I think that's another question and another thing that we need to talk together. So thanks for the question, and we need to work on that.
Alex, do you mind also telling us how concerned we are about this as a community and as the EC person?
How concerned we are about coordination by the community?
No,
or?
I'm saying the growth of the number of submissions and
so
how hard
right now, PLDI is more or less stable at 350 or so. ICFP is at around 110-ish, kind of early hundreds, kind of. POPL is up to 380 now, but it's still not unusual. OOPSLA had a couple of hits. It went 400 when I was a PC chair, and then almost 600 now, and then it's larger than before coming up. We're afraid a little bit. It is something that we realize is a problem because the PCs are from the same SIG Plan members. If you think about it, 120 PCs, that's 4 PCs, that's like half the SIG Plan members, and you can't really serve all the time. The SC chairs meeting is the only way to sort of talk through that and keep updated. It is not happening as probably much as it needs to happen. If anything, we should probably meet more often. All I can say is that we are aware as the 4SC communities that this is a problem. We haven't fixed it yet.
I want to just add one more thing. I think our mortal fear when we agreed to chair is what happens if we get more submissions than we estimated for, and that's why we put the reserve reviewer policy in place, what you call threatening, that we threatened, and sure, you can characterize it however you want, and it's no skin off my back. Call it what you like. And that was not arrived at completely independently. I actually had a discussion with colleagues in my department who represent several areas. I found out what ACL was doing. I found out what another community was doing. I studied, and then Sukyung and I discussed this quite a bit. And then we decided to come up with a particular policy based on all of that. So I think we're actually very aware of what other communities are doing. And we did it. And in fact, if you look at the blog post that we wrote on the SIG Plan blog explaining the reserve reviewer policy, it actually includes links to all of those other communities, including the 2024 versus 2025, to also show how they have changed, right? I think the problem here is nobody has great answers. It's not like there's an obvious correct answer and then like we just have a lack of information. The great thing about computer science is we keep experimenting with different formats. Should we have 1 round? Should we have 2 rounds? Should we call them rounds, call them something else? Are they conferences, journals? CS is just full of random experimentation and like some vaguely, evolutionary path. So I think all of us are trying to deal with scale are going to try different experiments, and maybe in 2 to 3 years it'll shake out. And some of the experiments may be terrible. They might have chairs threatening authors in various ways. Other people will come up with better experiments, and then we'll find a thing that works.
Just to be fair, I think the threatening was fairer than the conferences who've dumped extra work on the committee. So.
Thank you. So again, as Alex said, the 4 conferences SC chairs are now meeting, and so we are discussing. So hope for the best. Yes, Ben? Oh, didn't know that. Catherine?
So if you have ethical concerns, we have the CARES committee for informal discussions on what you might be suspecting is bad behavior, and then they can guide you to how to report different things that go wrong. And is that talk to the program chair if you're a reviewer, or if you're an author, or if something happens that's unethical, not just unwelcoming or harassment, because the community has had problems in the past, and ACM took very seriously now putting new policies in place and much better procedures for investigating things. But ultimately, ACM doesn't employ any of us, and and reporting unethical behavior to each university or company is a very complicated process too. So what ACM can do is pull a paper, a paper from a conference, but as a scientist, if you're doing something completely unethical, your university or your company needs to be investigating it too. So ACM has a very limited stick for unethical behavior, and they are using it, but it's not, because they don't employ you, there's a limited amount they can do to people who aren't following the ethics of good science. But CARES is supposed to be there for you. So if you think something's not good, go talk to somebody who you trust, who's on the CARES committee, and they can give you good advice for how to pursue whatever you think is not correct. And I encourage you very highly to do that.
Thank you. Okay, I want to take the two of you, but I also noticed we have not had a single student show up and ask a question. So I would encourage students to maybe consider, if you have a question, don't let us old fogies dominate. Giannis and I are going to be arguing for the next 20 years anyway, so. Yeah.
All right, so thank you for sparing us the boring slides before, but it would be nice if we could get those statistics maybe offline. I wanted to say something. So the best use of everyone's time here, I think, since we're in a community setting, is to be able to get feedback in bulk that's hard to get. So like, for example, having a vote like that, I think that's actually very instructive and very good use of our time. And I think what one of the previous questions was, people are suggesting things, and then, you know, there should be some discussion, but also they're kind of being cut off and said, go email these people. I think people are a little bit confused about, you know, what is the back and forth here. And I think, you know, if we could have a little bit more participation, and like, you're also curious about what we think about how things went. And so maybe you could also ask us and poll us and get a sentiment.
Ben, there's a whole survey that goes out at the end of the conference, okay? And that's going to get answered by hopefully everybody who attended. We have...
Okay, so I will do it. How many people have filled out a survey before?
Good, thank you.
That is good.
All right, yeah, thanks. Even if you didn't, thanks for raising your hand. Okay. Ben, I just want to point out, first of all, we have a total of 40 minutes for this session, and I'm mindful of the fact we're actually at our time limit, okay? So part of the reason we've been trying to go through this quickly is, first of all, we've never done anything like this before that I know of. We're trying to figure this out as we go along. And secondly, I'm very mindful that I want to let people get out roughly on time. So that's part of the reason we're trying to get more people to comment and get the feedback and understand what's going on, and maybe not go into every single thing back and forth, because then we'll never get the next person. That's one of the reasons you're seeing. Thank you.
So I'm returning to an earlier topic. Alex, you mentioned when we were talking about budgets, surprise, you mentioned when we were talking about budgets that we had conferences, we had the pandemic, and then after the pandemic we started going in the hole. That doesn't entirely line up with my understanding of the timeline. I thought the 2022 immediately post-pandemic conferences actually were still doing reasonably well.
No, 2020 onwards, most of them made a loss.
Okay.
And more recently, like last year, every single one made a loss. Big loss.
We've made other changes since the pandemic, other than existing in the world since the pandemic. Has there been any sort of systematic ways in which we run our conferences that had a distinct discontinuity that we could look at?
Sorry, what's the discontinuity?
I don't know, that's what I was asking.
Well, as far as I can tell, it was a combination of basically luck or circumstances we couldn't control to an extent where we were making decisions and committing ourselves, and then kind of stuck in contracts that sometimes worked to pull out, some didn't, and people kind of stopped looking, if that makes sense, to like how the conferences were organized. And then we went back to normal after 2 years, hiatus, and people kind of forgot how they used to run the conferences before COVID and started sort of, like that's my understanding, making decisions and things like that. Well, it's maybe an offline thing to discuss, but...
this is exactly what's going to piss off people.
Yeah,
okay, let me give you two quick answers, okay? Sure. One is the corporate world changed significantly, right? ZERP ended, and like all kinds of things changed about how corporate sponsorship and things like that worked. The other is there were significant personnel changes Now, I hope you will recognize that we don't want to talk about every detail in public, but there were significant personal changes. Annabelle Satin, who many of us know, Annabelle no longer works with us. And so there's been an entire learning process, and all those years Annabelle learned to optimize our events. All that knowledge was lost. Does that compute as a cause?
That sounds like a discontinuity.
And so there's like a whole new learning about how the contracting works in a new regime. So even Annabelle may have had all sorts of struggles in the new regime, but we had a new regime and a whole new set of people, and that combination has caused some difficulties that we're trying to work out now, and a lot of learning has happened.
Great.
Good. Really quick. Okay. Tell you what. Here's the thing. It's now 6:30. Anybody who wants to leave is welcome to. I mean, you've always been welcome to leave. Some of you walked out already. You're always welcome to leave. You're not actually hostage or anything like that. But we'll stick around and answer questions. I'll stick around and answer questions for people who want to ask questions.
If you want to take a photo, though, with the certificate.
Go outside. Yeah, there's a photo
Charles
booth or something.
is the general chair and has all the certificates.
So we're gonna, me and the SRC chair and the artifact chair will be standing outside if you want to get your certificate. And leave will be outside.
So anyone who is here was just waiting for the photos and the certificates, there they are. You can come out. The photographer, Philip, maybe you can come with them, and we will basically do everything that you wanted in terms of obtaining the certificate. But anyone who wants to carry on the discussion,
go ahead. Should I ask now or wait?
Just wait for.
Yeah.
Go for it.
All right, so well, here's a student question since you wanted one.
Yes.
There were two different paper submission portals, one for the main reviewing version and one for the camera-ready version. I think this was the first time this has happened, but well, is the plan to integrate those two eventually, or just to switch entirely to using one of the two, or?
No. So for those of you who are not familiar with the process, so basically there's the hot crap is how the reviewers, the program committee deals with the paper, okay? There's a company that gets hired to do the final processing of the paper. And that company has its own mechanism because it has a completely different set of concerns. They are not in the review process, they are more in the production process, and that is a completely different set of software and a different set of concerns. It's not actually a new thing. It's always been the case that the people who handle the final paper tend to be a little different from the people, like there was a company called Sheridan Printing, there's another company called Aptara, there's a company called Conference Publishing. They're all different entities that tend to have their own somewhat different processes. So it's not a completely new thing, and I don't think that will change. We may have been bad at giving instructions. That's always a possibility. We probably were. But the fact that there are two different things is because there are two different processes. One is a review and decision-making process. The other is the actual printing publication process. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, Jeremy, Rochester Institute of Technology. I'm a new PhD student. People may have left who are relevant to hear this based on previous discussions, but having just come for PLMW at a joint conference, it was particularly effective, I think, at exposing me to a lot of new topics and things. So I think that was particularly good of having the co-located conferences. But my question is, I've been perusing the SIGPlan website and so on, and I think there's a lot of things that are really well documented in terms of policies. I mean, relatively speaking, that there's policies and guidance and everything. Maybe it's somewhere deep in the bylaws that I didn't read, but I don't understand financially, how does the organization work as sort of an international thing?
You're asking about ACM, I guess, rather than SIGPlan. So SIGPlan is one small part of a bigger organization called Association for Computing Machinery. Now, that organization existed since 1960-something, I guess, a while. And we do have some people from the higher up in it, but they've just left. There was a couple from publication board. And it makes sure the SIGs exist, right? Now, special interest groups are then going to be grouped in things like ours, which is SIGPlan, and as well as others. Yeah. Now, what it used to do as a massive thing for a while was the digital library in the last several decades, which is the one you go to and you look at the papers and you read them. And they had, huh? Or,
Yeah, I think I understand what ACM is. I mean, that was clarifying a little bit, but yeah, I mean, and if you don't think it's a valuable thing to talk about, that's fine, but...
But what's the financial thing? Because, I mean, for example, the reason that we run the conferences is for us to have the way to sort of meet and to you know, communicate and publish our results. Now, when we run them, the HQ, if you like, of the ACM is the ones who do the actual like invoices or pay people, right? So, I mean, it's not an organization that's out there to make a lot of money. Yeah. This is us. So that's what the bylaws discuss. So I'm not sure.
Okay. I think you. Okay. My guess is that your question is from the SIG plan webpage. It is difficult for you to understand the financial running of this entity. Yes. I think that's your question, right? So, for example, you would like to know, for example, where does the money go? What is the money spent on? How much revenue does SIG plan get in a year, and how much does it spend in a year? That would be an example of a thing that would have helped you? Yeah. Okay, Alex, can you find that information on the SIG plan page?
It's not on a web page, but SIG plan in 1 year, the turnover is around $2.5 or $3 million, which is mostly from the conferences that we run. And that basically balances out almost evenly with a particular percentage mandated to be given to ACM to run the rest of it, which they change depending on their basically costs. And that's all we do. We just report numbers.
I think the answer to your question is you are correct that you are unable to find it even though there's other things documented, because what Alex has confirmed is that information's not on the webpage. I don't think it's a desire to be private. I think it's just more it hasn't happened. And I hesitate to say this because I'm going to get flamed again, but you might consider writing to Alex and saying, could you put this information on the webpage because I would like to see it, because frankly, so would I. So maybe you and I will both write to Alex.
If we allow.
Yeah, there may be some question about whether we're allowed. It seems weird as a nonprofit that it wouldn't be allowed, but there may be something. But I think you're right. I think it's a good idea for SIG plan to make clear where's the money coming from, where's it going.
Hi, I'm Purva. I'm a student at UCLA. So I guess my question is more of a comment around the artifact evaluation and how it works with the main track. So it's relevant for this OOPSLA', it's relevant for all 4 conferences in general. It has always, not always, my experience has been that artifact submission deadline is before the final, quote unquote, final deadline, which kind of forces us to divide our attention. So would it be possible to experiment with having artifact submission deadline after the revision deadline?
So, as the inventor of artifact evaluation, I have some strong opinions on this matter, and therefore I'm probably not the most qualified person to talk about it. But first of all, I have 2 comments on this. First is we have to have the artifact evaluation process done before the final paper, before the eventual paper, because of the badging. Okay, but the goal of artifact evaluation is not first you write the paper and then you think about like, oh, maybe we should actually make the data public to somebody, right? The whole goal has always been you should be doing your research in a sufficiently responsible way that if somebody wanted to read it, they could read it and they could make sense out of your thing, right? Every now and then there are reviewers who say, I don't actually trust the data in this paper. I mean, not even trust, it's not like you lied, but I think maybe you have a performance improvement at 10%. It might be explicable by this instead of that. I would like to be able to run it myself and see whether that is true. Okay? Like it would be.
I think she's not talking about the camera ready deadline. I think she's talking about the deadline for revisions when you're conditionally accepted.
Yes, because sometimes in those conditional accept requirements, there are changes required, like the reviewers have asked changes in experiments, slight changes in the experiments, which requires a need to update the artifact. And now, if I need to submit the artifact and my paper is not ready, so how do I submit these?
Here's what happened.
Yes.
There's a very easy solution to this problem, which we chose not to use, and we chose to accept a much messier solution. The very easy solution is only papers that have already been accepted can submit for artifact evaluation.
Okay.
Okay, then then you agree there's no problem.
There is still a problem.
What's the problem?
And it's probably not an OOPSLA specific problem, because in other conferences where you don't have the major revision or minor revision, they might still choose conditional accept because the changes in experiments are not.
Yeah, so but I'm saying once the paper's in accept status, only papers in accept status can submit an artifact.
Are you saying conditional accept or accept?
No, accept.
Accept.
Okay. Accept. Do you agree that if your only accepted papers can submit an artifact, we agree there's no problem?
Yes.
Okay. If we had done that, a whole bunch of people would not have been able to get artifact badging this year. Okay? So we had to make a compromise. The compromise we made is we said we will also allow conditional accept papers, knowing full well that there is this problem of like these things are going to be changing. And we said, therefore, you can resubmit your artifact near the end of the artifact evaluation pipeline dates so that you can get the last final thing reevaluated. That was a compromise to enable more authors to get artifact evaluation. If we had not done that compromise, anybody who got a conditional accept would not, in fact, it would have kind of leaked the status of a lot of papers because like, why does this paper obviously has an artifact and has no badges? Well, it must have not been accepted as a regular accept. Okay, so we were trying to make it easier for more authors, not easier, we were trying to make it possible for more authors to get artifact badging with the way the dates line up, and this is one of the difficulties of having 2 review rounds, is there's just not enough time. Okay, it would have been great to like finish all of this and then start that. There was literally no way of doing that with the timeline. That's why we chose to make this compromise, and any author who didn't want to participate didn't have to participate. We were giving authors a choice. And I think we even sent mail explaining this what's happening, but maybe we didn't. I can't remember. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a compromise to try to like make a bunch of like difficult to reconcile things somehow badly fit together as opposed to not fit together at all.
Okay.
Yeah. Karine?
Why not just sending the artifact evaluation as it was on the conditional accept? So before they asked you all the changes, you do have a final version of your artifact.
Let's move on to more questions. Yeah. Okay. Next question over there, please. Go ahead.
Hi, Amanda Liu, student at MIT. I was wondering, so lately, to my chagrin, I've been reading a lot of machine learning venue papers, and something that I found actually kind of interesting, educational, and just kind of like, I don't know, piqued my interest is the open review structure. And one thing that you talked about is just like the quality of reviews in this community, and I definitely agree. And even reading the reviews for my own papers, I've like learned a lot. And so I was wondering, like, what are your thoughts on implementing something like that?
I'll let Sukan speak for herself because I think each of us has to speak for ourselves. I think it's kind of an interesting culture. I don't think it is SIGPLAN's culture, and it would take like a significant cultural shift to move to that model. I think part of the problem is at least people who are not used to the model would find it very uncomfortable. That doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing, it's just a different thing. And I think it's got some strengths, it's got some weaknesses. It just seems hard to move, from one fixed point to another fixed point, and it's a very distant fixed point. Anyway, I guess it seems like the kind of thing that maybe we should have a conversation about, but certainly I hear no attempt to have a conversation about it because nobody seems to be clamoring for it inside SIGPLAN. And I know that's not much of an answer, but I don't, I've thought about it, we talked about it a little bit when we were chairs, like, should we do open reviews? Like, I think it would be like, if 2 chairs tried to change it, it would be like a massive like revolution and people would yell at us even more than they're yelling at us tonight. So it would take some effort. It might be an experiment somebody to consider. Yeah. We thought about it and we decided we had enough to do and didn't want to take it on. Yeah, I mean, I will say that I'm not saying it's an equivalent or substitute for it, but artifact evaluation tends to have a little bit of that flavor. artifact evaluators are always students, and so they do get some sense of what the review process looks like and what it's like to be participating in a program committee of some sort. It's not the same as program reviewing, but it is a way to bring students into the mix a little bit more. It's not the same as a shadow PC, but it actually gives them more teeth than a shadow PC does. I know. I'm not unaware. Yeah, I'm aware of that. Yes, I was saying that there's something we do that they don't, and there's something they do we don't, and some chair with more time and energy should try to think about doing that. Yeah.
So you spoke a bit about how the artifact is like a culture thing, where you really care that the artifact is somehow useful for somebody else to reproduce. What do you think about making sure that this is tied to the decision of the paper? And
this has been the perennial question from day one. When artifact evaluation was invented, people were appalled at the idea this might happen because that would mean fewer papers would be accepted. And so the mechanism was designed purposely to say, no, don't worry, your wonderful papers will be accepted whether the artifact works or not. What has always been left unstated is what happens if an artifact evaluation comes back and says, actually there's nothing here, this is all complete garbage, right? But I think there is actually a mechanism for that, which is that it is a journal, and we do have, ACM Digital Library has policies. So in principle, if the artifact evaluators came back to us and said, we looked at the paper and this paper is complete like nothing here is true, it's all lies, right? And if we were to converse with the authors, we could use that as an argument to make a fraud case against the paper and try to have the paper be pulled from the digital library. So there is actually a mechanism for pulling that off. So in a way, it's kind of like maybe the best of both worlds. We don't have to, because otherwise like that timing and everything gets so much more complicated. And so maybe it's not a bad compromise, given that the digital library has a mechanism for pulling papers. And maybe we should make that clearer to authors so that they realize, oh shit, this could happen.
Please.
Yeah.
Thank you.